Good day, everyone. Welcome to Travel, Explore, Celebrate Life, brought to you by Veena World Podcasts. We are your hosts. I'm Neil Patil, and I'm joined, as always, by Sunila. Now, today we are going to talk about a city that Sunila has been to 3 to 4 times. It is the largest city and also the capital city, if I'm not wrong, of the Czech Republic. We are going to talk about Prague. And Sunila, you've been there 3 to 4 times, and you often keep telling us in all of the product presentations that you do with your customized holidays team at Veena World that you really love visiting Prague, and you often use Prague and a romantic town as synonyms, because you're like, in Europe, if you are to find one romantic town, and of course Europe has many romantic towns, you often also say that Prague is also one of Europe's prettiest cities. And so, like, I wanted to ask you, why do you say that? Like, what are the reasons that Prague is actually Europe's prettiest city, or could be considered as one of Europe's prettiest cities?
Yes, Neil, I think definitely when it comes to the prettiest cities in Europe, Prague would be one of my top most cities. Like, it's really a contender for the top position. I mean, of course, there's Paris, and of course, there's London, and of course, there are all the great cities of Europe. Um, you know, but Prague is really up there. And one of the main reasons is because everything is very compact. Like, it's all together, and you don't have to spend days and days and days. Of course, you would want to spend a lot of days out there, but you can see a lot and do a lot within a good 3 4 days. Like, if you think of all the other cities, they are so widely spread, and there is so much of variation that you would wonder it really takes long. But when you think of Prague, it has a castle, you have a river, you have one of the prettiest bridges in Europe, you have an old town that will keep stunning you. With every step you take, there's something new. There is a beautiful square. You can spend beautiful evenings out there, and we'll talk about that more. So you can shop, you can eat, you can party all night, you can do whatever you want. And to top it all, you can be in a horse carriage ride and go around the city. Like, it's really like going back in time. And for that very reason, and it looks great in the day and it looks beautiful at night. So I think with all of this put together, I mean, you could be on your Instagram and just have an account for Prague if you wanted to. It's that pretty. So I would really, really put it as one of the very pretty cities with a lot to do. And it's for everyone, all ages, all age groups, everything. Friends, honeymooners, seniors, everybody will find something to do in Prague.
So, like when I was reading up on Prague as we were prepping for this episode, I came across a thing where they call Prague the city of the 100 spires, because there is the old town
Yes.
square and all of these things that you mentioned. So in many ways, many of the videos that I watched, many of the podcasts that I listened to, called it an architectural dream. Okay, so let's get into a little bit of detail. Why is it called an architectural dream? Like, often we see our MICE team taking architectural tours to
Yes.
Prague. So all of these institutes that are teaching architecture or interior design often go to many Scandinavian countries. Then they go to many countries. Well, Prague is often considered as Eastern Europe, but if you really think about Prague, and if you say that, like, if you go to Prague and you tell them that, oh, I'm in Eastern Europe, they don't really like it, because they often take offense and they say that, hey, we are not in Eastern Europe, we are in Central Europe. And you'll often find people of Prague saying that. So let's dive into this a little. Why is it an architectural dream? Like, how was your experience?
Neil, even if you don't know anything about architecture, you can't help but notice that each building, especially in the old town, and when we talk of Prague, essentially we are speaking of old town, because the old town and the castle district are the two main areas. Both are across the river. So you have the old town on one side, and then you have the castle district on the other. So the astronomical clock, which is pretty famous, is on one side, and you have the Ratsani castle on the other side. Both these areas are really stunning. And as you walk around, and again, like many other cities in Europe, the best way to discover Prague is on foot. And I would highly recommend that you take one walking tour to discover that. And you realize that each building, like you're walking and you don't know where to stop, where to take photos. So literally I was there with my friends, and two of them are, NRIs, they live in the US. And she just went crazy. She said, I don't know whether to look down, up, by the side, where to look. Each building is different from the other. And I think it's one of those rare cities where within this short area, you can actually see all different types of architecture. So when we speak of architecture in Europe, typically we talk of Gothic architecture, we speak of baroque architecture, right? And Prague, like we took a walking tour, and on that tour, the guide told us that the reason why Prague is so pretty and so beautiful, it is that it was actually twice the capital of the Roman Empire. And the Roman Empire, there was the Roman Empire with Rome as the capital, and then you had the Eastern Roman Empire. So Prague was the capital of the Eastern Roman Empire. It was first Charles IV for the first time, and the second time it was the Habsburgs. And they wanted to make their capital pretty. So they brought Baroque and Renaissance architecture with them. And you name it. So Baroque architecture, the whole Renaissance architecture, the Gothic architecture, Art Nouveau architecture, everything that you could think of, any form of architecture that you want to think, you can see it here. In fact, there's something else that we saw here, and we just started. So when you do the walking tour, you start off with this powder gate, which is an excellent example of Gothic architecture. Right next to it is this beautiful building, which is an example of Art Nouveau architecture, and it houses one of the best cafes. So you can actually go in there and experience what is Art Nouveau. So to give our listeners an example, since we are getting into architecture, Art Nouveau is what you see in Paris a lot with, the metro signs in Paris are often what you see written in Art Nouveau style. And then we walked a little ahead, and she said, do you see something strange about this building? And there was a building on the block, again with a cafe, a little shop, and it had a black Madonna out there. And that was what was known as Cubism. So everything was angular, very different. And this was the first Cubist building in the world. And it has about some 38 Cubist buildings there, which was like a revolt against the old style of architecture. And everything there was angular. And to give our listeners an idea, Cubism is what kind of inspired our own painter M.F. Hussain. So if you see his paintings, everything is angular. So you see that, and you see all of these wonderful things right together. And then if you come to like modern day architecture, then you have something called the Dancing House in Prague, which is known as also called the Dancing House, or it's called Fred and Ginger, which is a nickname. And this is the national Netherlands building. And this was designed by a Czech architect, Vlado Milunic, and you actually see it. And this was in cooperation with Frank Gehry, the famous Canadian-American architect. And the building actually, it looks like, is it broken? Is it dancing? Because you have to Google it and see it, how the dancing building looks. So right from history, like to now, there is something that will stun you with its architecture. And that's why I think, I saw a lot of students, art students and others also sitting down there and actually making sketches of the cities, and as they were doing. And of course, there are a lot of others who would sell photos. And I think the artists by the side, I often really like them. In Europe, you see a lot of these artists on the bridge and on the pavements and sidewalks who sell these beautifully made, watercolors and other things of the city. And with Prague, I mean, it's an open palette for everyone. There is just so much to do. So I think because you can see so many different styles all together, definitely known as the architecture city.
So, you mentioned the astronomical clock. So do you know the legend behind it and how the astronomical clock and the Taj Mahal in India actually have something in common?
Oh, wow. I know a little bit about the stories and the legends, but go ahead. Tell us about the Taj Mahal. This is really interesting.
So, so Prague's astronomical clock was like, I don't have the year in which it was built, but it was built by this person named Heinus Carolinum. Heinus Carolinum. Now, the old city councillors, like the people who were on the old city council, really were scared that everything that is there in Prague, and you mentioned a lot of these things and why it is an architectural dream. They were really scared that Europe has so much history, so much culture, and it has so many monuments that many of our monuments could be copied. Now, so this Heinus Carolinum, who built the clock, once he built it, they were like amazed. They were like, oh wow, this is a very nice clock, this is a great clock. And they were like, no one should be able to build this again in any other European city. So you know what happened to the person who built the Taj Mahal, right? Shah Jahan,
Yeah, yeah.
like, did he cut off his hands so that he couldn't?
That's what
Like,
they say. Yeah,
that's
and
what the
his eyes.
legend
Yeah,
says. And we
yeah.
covered that in our episode where we spoke about the white Taj Mahal and the black Taj Mahal also, right? A long time ago. But here, what they did was they decided to blind him, so he
Mm-hmm.
could not do it. And all of these people in the old council decided to blind him, and they went ahead and blinded him so that he could not recreate this clock in another city, which would make this a little less famous and
Mm-hmm.
everything. But even after that, it has been replicated in one city in the world, and that is in Seoul, in South Korea, where you'll find an identical astronomical clock. So that was a story that I came across, and I was like, yeah, like, many of the old city council people all across the world would often have that. We have spoken about how the Eiffel Tower has been replicated all across the world.
Mm.
You will see a Statue of Liberty in Tokyo, some like, in one of the districts of Tokyo. So a lot of these things anyways happen. So let's get into the main sites. Like,
Neil, before we do that, I have
yeah.
a really funny and interesting story about the astronomical clock. So
Okay, tell
this
us.
is again something that I learned, and the astronomical clock is stunning. Okay, and I mean it may be made in China or whatever, but I did come back with a small magnet, which was the replica of the astronomical clock, because I was just so wowed by it. Every time I go there, I love it so much. And even in that little magnet, the clock is moving. So I thought it was really pretty. So I got it back. But the astronomical clock is amazing, and it's working even really well today. It's something that you must go and see, because it shows a lot of things, right? It shows you the moonrise, it shows you the sunrise. So the red part of the clock, there are black, red, there are two parts to the clock, and on the top part you have the Gothic numbers also, which show the Czech time. Then you have the Roman numbers, which show the German time. You have a blue number, which shows the daytime, like that's the Babylonian clock. And the black part shows you that this is the night time. Then the red part shows you when the sun rises, and there is the moon phases as well, which is on it, right? So all of that works, and it's still in really good working condition. And earlier, the reason that was funny is that it shows that the earth is in the center and the sun is going around it, because that's what people believed at that time. So it kind of gives you a thought back into the history. We won't go too much about the clock, but there is just a lot to tell you about that. However, one really interesting thing was that there are four characters on the clock, and they represent different parts of the society. So you have the mirror that shows you aristocracy, then there is somebody representing greed, there are sinners, and there is a skeleton. And this, I really found it interesting, because every hour when the clock strikes, the skeleton has like a sand clock in his hand. And every hour when the clock strikes, the story is that the skeleton is calling everyone to die. It's reminding us that, you know, do not sin, because life will ultimately end in death. So that is really funny. It comes out and starts making a sound, and all the sinners there are shaking their head that we don't want to die. So it's really quite a spectacle. You must watch it, and definitely if you're going to Prague, make sure that you try to go there at least, like, say 10 minutes before the clock strikes any hour, because that's when you'll see the whole clock in action, and you'll get a good spot to watch it. So definitely do that.
So, we've established that the astronomical clock is definitely one of the sites to visit in Prague. Now,
Yes.
in addition to that, what are some of the places that you would say should be on someone's bucket list? Maybe if they are there for a day, 2 days, maybe 10 days. So, like, what are some of the things that you would have on your bucket list after doing so many trips there?
Yes, Neil. So the astronomical clock is one. Right next to the astronomical clock is the old town, the old town square. And this square is really important, because all along the square, you see these old palaces where people lived. In fact, there is also a small cafe here where Einstein was said to come here and be in the salon. And he also taught in the university there. Franz Kafka, the famous philosopher from Prague, was born right here. There is a church here, the Twin Church, which is known as Adam and Eve Church, which is also something that you must see. And there are a lot of monuments out there, and other things. So that's a great place. The square is also famous. It was used for ice hockey, when it Christmas markets, all of that. So it's really a pretty place that you must go and visit. And also, like I told you, it shows you a lot of different architectural styles. So you have Gothic and baroque, and one of my favorite styles, which is known as the rococo architecture, which looks like those wedding cakes that you see, like really decorative. So the old town square is something definitely you should visit, and which is right next to your astronomical clock. Along with that, Wenceslas Square. And in fact, this time when I went, our hotel was right in Wenceslas Square. And that was really nice because it was very easy to get to everywhere. And I think living in the heart of a city always makes sense, because then you can walk anywhere and everywhere that you want to go. So that part, then you cross over. And I think one of the main attractions in this area, of course, is when you come and you want a different aspect of history, is the Jewish quarter. So the Jewish quarter is also known as Josepho, and this was named after Joseph, and it houses some of the oldest synagogues and oldest cemeteries in Europe. So, in fact, the oldest Jewish cemetery in Europe is here in Prague, and you can get like a common ticket that gives you access to all of these different places. There's also a little museum which talks about the Jews in Prague, and the whole story, and how the Munich Pact came into action, how Prague saved itself, and the whole story of the Nazis and Prague and Jews and all of that. So that is definitely something that you should see. Also, another thing that you can see there is the Rudolfinum, which was home of the Czech Philharmonic, and really pretty buildings. Mozart also played here, and in fact, his opera Don Giovanni is something that he launched out here. There is also a Mozart museum for Mozart fans that you can go in and see. So this is at the Opera House, and they're really stunning places. This is all in Old Town. Yeah, and then we come to the Charles Bridge. It definitely is one of the prettiest bridges in Europe. It has some 16 arches and a lot of statues. And Neil, it dates from 1357. So it was built by Charles IV in 1357. This crosses the Vltava River, and it connects the old town to the castle area, and really is a nice place to have photographs for all around, and very stunning area. I mean, usually you use a bridge just to cross over, but this is a bridge that you would want to spend more time. And when we talk of Prague, I keep going back to architecture, but the whole Gothic and Baroque styles both can be seen on the bridge itself. So that's definitely something that you would see. Once you cross the Charles Bridge, you come to the Castle District and Malastrana. And in the Castle District, there is also this whole lane of shops, which is known as the Goldsmiths Lane, because first the guards lived here, and after that, people who actually made a lot of gold and everything, the goldsmiths were all around here. And even the Castle District with its old cobblestone pathways, there's just so much to do out there. There is, of course, the St. Nicholas Church and many other important monuments that you would do, but do stop by for a coffee, because there are some beautiful squares that you can stop by, have coffee, have some of Prague's traditional, specialities as well. And it's really quite stunning. So another thing to do, of course, are the cruises on the Vltava River, and a lot of people like to do that as well. What we noticed was this time round when we went, the Castle District was closed because, I think it'll take still a few more months for everything to be functional, but that area was closed. You could still go down there and walk around everywhere. Uh, but I realized we were there only for 2 nights in Prague, and I thought I needed at least three, because again, to do everything and to enjoy and to relax and to have fun, you need time. So definitely 3-4 nights is something I'd spend in Prague.
So, we've like over the last 20 minutes, we have spent time discussing why it is a pretty city, why it is an architectural dream, what are all the sites here. But Prague is also known to house one of Europe's biggest nightclubs. It is also said to be a place where people drink more beer than anywhere in the world per capita. So, like over the 2 days that you may have spent on one of your visits there, what did you think of the nightlife? Because a lot of backpackers in this town, a lot of student hostels, and a lot of the student hostels do pub crawls or nightclub crawls, and all of these things happen. So, often it is said that Vienna, Prague, Budapest is a good itinerary. So I'm going to ask you this question, where what I can combine Prague with a little later. But what did you think of the nightlife? What was the nightlife like?
It's amazing, Neil. So it's like, when I asked them, we went to the hotel and he said, till what time are the nightclubs open? 1 or 2? And he said, well, you can be out till 4 o'clock if you want. And which kind of brings me back to my earlier point again, that if you plan to go there, and Prague is great place for friends to go to also, because there's just so many things you can do. In fact, I feel when we did the tour, our guide also told us that beer drinking, it really is cultural, because making beer actually became cultural here, and this was passed on from generation to generation. The secret of making beer was passed on from generation to generation in a family for survival. So it became a means of survival, and people would just keep making beer and doing it. And yeah, you're right, it's the biggest per capita in the world in terms of beer consumption. Neil, at Wenceslas Square, when we came and we checked into a hotel, I walked out and I noticed that there were three really big clubs and bars just across the street from us. And I thought that was so convenient, because if you want to stay out late in the night, and it was open till 4 a.m. in the morning, if you want to just have fun, you want to party all night, imagine the convenience of just being able to walk back to your hotel, because late at night, you don't want to drive. We had a car, we were driving around Europe, but we didn't want to go anywhere. You don't want to drink and drive. You don't want to do other things. So I think for someone who wants to enjoy the bars and the pubs, and these are spread all across Prague. So wherever you are, you will find them. You will find the nightclubs. You'll find some of the best ones. Again, it depends on how much you want to spend. There are different kinds of nightclubs there. And I saw a lot of people really enjoying, especially the weekends. So again, if you want to enjoy the clubs and the bars, then try to go in on at least a Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and you can really have a lot more fun. In fact, the city felt so live that we stayed out much longer. I'm an early sleeper, and I'm often my friends laugh at me because I really go to sleep very early. But this was a city that didn't let me sleep. I was out, and we would come back pretty late, and we felt very safe. Like, just as three women also, it was pretty safe to walk around. Lots of bars, so definitely a thumbs up for that. I think Prague is the great city to go around in the night.
So, Prague, I don't know whether you have visited it. Prague is also supposed to have the narrowest street, often said in the world, but it is the narrowest street. So now this street is only 50 centimeters wide, and it has a pedestrian traffic light, so that it will tell you that you can get in from this side. And if it's red, you can't get in from this side. So it is known to have that. Let's come to the food now. Some of the things that I've come across that one should have in Prague are the pork knuckle.
Yes.
The pork knuckle is something that is super famous. And for many of the uninitiated, and including me, I love my food, but I wouldn't like to have the pork knuckle because it just sounds very weird. And then I'm like, so did you get a chance to have it?
Actually, we did, but we didn't have it in Prague. I had it in Berlin, but Neil, you have to try it. It does sound weird. And when you think of knuckle, I somehow in my head, I hadn't looked at pictures earlier, thought it would probably be small. But definitely, I think one pork knuckle at least 4 people can have it. So if you do have pork part, by the way, Prague is a great place to have pork and pigs, because you'll see these huge pigs being roasted. So they are more of a meat-eating nation. And when we had it in Berlin, he insisted. We went to a very traditional restaurant, and we said, we want to try something that's very local. And he said, you have to have the pork knuckle in that case. And we were two of us, and we couldn't finish it. But it was crispy on the top and really tender meat inside at the same time. Amazing gravy by the side. So it just sounds, it doesn't sound that appetizing, but it is. So it's actually, think of it like a roast chicken, just a part of the pork that is more like a roasted pork, and really something that was amazing. And you must try it in Prague or Berlin or around that area when you go to. Make sure you're at least 3 or 4 people. Otherwise, you cannot finish or keep it for dinner. Take a pack and bring it back for dinner. So that's something you should do. There's lots of other things that you can try in Prague as well, but I found that some of the most interesting food was something that was unexpectedly that we would come across, and more like street food, I would say. So there was something called the chimney cones or tredelnik, which I really enjoyed. This was really nice, and it's fascinating to watch it being made. It's like therapy because they have these like rolling pins, and the whole dough is put over it, and it's continuously moving, and they're continuously making it, and then they pull it out, and you can have it stuffed with all kinds of things. And of course, people have gotten adventurous, so traditionally they have it sweet. You can even have ice cream in it, or some of them were even savory. So it's like a rolled up pizza in the hand or a rolled ice cream cone, but amazing and really delicious. So we kept
Yeah, like,
looking at it.
I would say that listeners, if you are listening to this right now, go to Google, just search for the chimney cake or the
Yes.
chimney bread, because it is a very iconic image that
Mhm.
you will come across. It is a massive hole in the middle, bread all on the outside. You could just get super creative making that. I think that was like, when I was going through all of the foods that one should eat in Prague, this would be like top of the list. Like it would be,
Definitely
yeah.
top of the list. I mean, that is something that you just must try. And you'll see Instagram flooded with photos like that, with the treadlenick in hand. They call it different things, treadly, treadlenick. They've made it short forms, treadlow and other things. But definitely, and something very easy that you can try. So you can even have it plain like a donut, just have it without other stuff. But yeah, I didn't really have too much time to try most of the other things. But typically around this whole area, Neil, along with Budapest, Berlin, Prague, are goulash and dumplings, and those are the kind of food that you should have. But something that else that I really liked, and this was by chance, was we were at the Powder Gate starting a tour, and we reached early so that we won't miss the walking tour. And then we found this small little cafe, something very new and that had been opened. And he was selling something which looked really interesting. So we walked in, and it was called kolachiri. And kolachiri was like an open pastry. So like a small open pastry, and again all kinds of different additions to that. So there was berries, and then again they got a little adventurous, and they also made the savory pastries. So we tried all of them because they weren't too big, they were small, and some of the best coffee in town was also there. So if you're around Powdergate, definitely go and go to Kolachari. And the person there was very patiently explaining everything to us as to what were the different types. And traditionally they put a lot of poppy seeds on top, so that is again something that you should try. So yeah, but chimney cakes is something you must have in Prague.
One final thing I'll mention, there's also pickled cheese. If you want to try
Yeah,
something
yeah,
unique, there are some bars that will give you as bar food pickled cheese. It's, yeah, it's something
mm,
that is a very acquired taste, but it's one dish that you will find really surprising, and you should definitely have it. Now, Sunila, as we reach the end of the episode,
mhm,
one I have two questions. One is, of course, you named Mozart, who was there, but
mhm.
there are many other famous personalities, amazing discoveries that have taken place in Prague. So let's spend some time discussing them, and we'll end the episode with what should we combine Prague with.
Yes. No, it's I think it's really important to understand Prague, because we often think of it only as something historical, but there's so much that happened there. I did mention a few things. Like I said, Mozart, inaugurated his Don Giovanni, his opera, in Prague. But one more important person is Antonin Dvorak. And Antonin Dvorak was this famous composer. In fact, his melody, which a lot of us know, but we don't know it comes from him. So his famous melody was used for two musical pieces in Hollywood. And actually, I'm sure you'll go back and listen to it, because that's what I did when I found this. His New World Symphony was the inspiration for two different things, and that was Star Wars and the movie Jaws. So even for Star Wars and Jaws, actually, when you see, it's the same music, the initial notes. And we said, oh yeah, that's right. So you when you go back and listen to it, you realize, so his New World Symphony was something that came from here. Franz Kafka, the very famous philosopher, also comes from Prague. Doppler effect is something that was discovered in Prague. The beer glass was discovered in Prague, Neil.
Oh, what?
So yeah, the beer glass was first time made in Prague. And in fact, if you want to come back with a souvenir, we often bring back those beer mugs from Germany, but a beer glass from Prague would be something you would do. Prague is also famous for a lot of crystals. So anything in crystal glasses, crystal bowls, or crystal jewelry is also something that, like Swarovski in Austria, you have the Prague crystal that is very famous. The 4 blood groups were discovered in Prague, and something that you would really like to know is that the contacts we use, eye contacts, were also discovered in Prague.
Like contact
Uh,
lenses?
Yes, the
Oh,
contact lenses were discovered in Prague. And something we use everywhere is the sugar cube. So that was also discovered in Prague. So there are just lots of things that were made here. And as you go around the city and you take, like, you can have a Kafka tour, you can have a Mozart tour, you can have all kinds of different tours and different themes based on what you like. But it's really nice to know all of this. And there are lots more that were discovered. The ship propeller, you can go on and on, but of course that's for another time. But a lot of things were really discovered here, which is quite stunning, and we're using it daily. Like, it's not just something that was discovered, it's quite useful, right? So something that is a part of our lives is all here. Before we go on to what to combine Prague with, I just want to say that Prague has a lot of beautiful points that you can go to in the day or evening, or viewpoints or observation points. And very often there are some really nice cafes out there. So you have one place called the Letna Beer Garden. So there are a lot of beer gardens, and you have to make a little bit of a trek to go up there. But once you're there, you have this beautiful view of the city. There's a very nice restaurant, and you can have a nice 3-course meal out there if you want to have a glass of beer or something, and really a pretty view of the city. You Definitely, I would recommend at least one meal in the old town square. Of course, a lot of restaurants there are pretty touristic, but you can sit down, and because it was getting kind of cold, we had some mulled wine and some local food, and it was very nice. And also you have the astronomical clock right there, so you can see it. Don't miss Prague by night, because that city is just too beautiful at night. So either you want to take the cruise you have a medieval cruise, you have medieval dinners, you have a dinner cruise that you could take on the Viltava, or just take a walk around, take a horse carriage ride, but see the city when it's illuminated. It's really stunning.
awesome. Now, there's so much, like the city of discoveries, I guess, the sugar
Yes.
cube, the contact lenses, largest city in the Czech Republic, the capital, um, architectural marvel. Prague is associated with all of that. When we go to Europe, of course, as a traveler, we don't like going to just one city. So what should I combine it with? Let's end this episode of Travel, Explore, Celebrate Life with that.
Yeah, if you want to just go to the Czech Republic itself, then I would say you can combine it with Český Krumlov. You can even make Prague your base and visit these places. Český Krumlov is a medieval old town, and it has a 13th century castle. You can also go to Brno and check it out. And very often this can be done even when you're doing extended tours out. Another place that you could go to is Karlovy Vary, which is a resort town with a lot of thermal spas. So if you like spas, you like thermal water, you like bathing in thermal water, then spend time there. You can even stay a night there at a nice hotel and have your spa in your hotel itself. There is another city called Kutna Hora that you could visit. So definitely, I would say that is probably maybe the second time round or the third time round that you would go to Prague. That is something you can do. If not, like you mentioned some time back, and like we have it in Veena word, to Prague, Vienna, Budapest, with Bratislava is kind of the best combination that you could want to. I think the entire tour just becomes stunning, because Vienna, we spoke about Vienna last time, is a very pretty city. Prague is really pretty, and Budapest is stunning as well. So, and a lot of things for youngsters to do, a lot of things for honeymoon, for romance, for friends. There's just so much in all of these cities. And Bratislava in Slovakia, that's again a party town all the way. So, you have just the best of Eastern Europe. So it's a feast for the eyes, all of these cities. And there's just a lot to do. And they're not too far off. So you spend like 2 hours, 3 hours one way, maybe traveling from one city to the other. So I would say a nice combination is Prague, Vienna, Budapest, along with Bratislava, or like I told you, the other places in Czech Republic itself that you could visit.
I would also say that it is a place that you can visit all around the year. Now, I was just looking up
Yes.
all of the departures that we have, and you, of course, you mentioned the Vienna, Prague, Budapest, Bratislava tour that we have over 7 days. We also have the 15 and 23 day, right? But more importantly, Prague is a place that after our product team did all of the research, we have like launched departures April, May, June, July, August of next year. So like, I would like to say that Europe as a continent, guys, earlier used to be thought of that, oh, I should really go only in the months of April, May, and June, which is the summer. But if you look at trends now, and especially post the pandemic, people are traveling, and it's much easier to travel now than it was before. So I would say like it is a destination that one can go all through the year. So Sunila, how do we end this episode?
Sunil, absolutely right. I think you can go there throughout the year and you can do different things. Like you mentioned, throughout the year, come December, we have the Christmas markets out there. So that's again a different experience. And you can even combine it with Berlin, for example. So it depends on how many days you have in hand. I would say definitely visit Prague. But, I think just go as if you're never going to go again and try and see as much. But once you see it, you'll fall in love and you'll want to come back there again and again. And then you can start combining different cities with it and maybe add different countries also to the whole experience. It's really easy to get around, and whether you're driving, whether you're going by train or you're on a coach tour, it's beautiful all the way.
Awesome. I guess that's it. Listeners, thank you for tuning in to Travel, Explore, Celebrate Life. We will see you next week with another interesting destination and incredible stories around that destination. Sunila, thank you. Have a super weekend ahead. Bye everyone. Take care.
Bye.
See you.